Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Wednesday, February 24th, 2016, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday. And another weekend here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in the control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Obviously, the big news coming out of the Nevada GOP caucuses last night. Donald Trump won. More than winning, he just absolutely left the competition in the dust. He wound up with 45.9% of the vote. That gives him 14 delegates. Marco Rubio came in second place with 23.9% of the vote and 7 delegates. Ted Cruz, 21.4% of the vote and 6 delegates. Now, at this point, it's starting to be very obvious that Donald Trump is for real. And even though it is already late in the primary season, Donald Trump is finally starting to get some congressional endorsements. A lot of people on Capitol Hill are starting to realize this guy could be the boss next year, and they better get on his good side. Now, looking back at history, Donald Trump has won more votes than Mitt Romney had at this point in 2012, and much more than John McCain had won at this point in 2008. Of course, John McCain came with a built-in self-destruct mechanism, Caribou Barbie. I still cannot understand the thinking behind that. Now, we're seeing articles all over the place here. Rubio and Cruz gambled against Trump and came up snake eyes. And basically saying that, I mean, look at Nevada. Nevada is, the entire state is all about glitz and gambling and all this other stuff. And there was no surprise that Trump was going to do very, very well in there. He's seen as one of them, even though most of his casino activity was on the East Coast. Now, we are starting to hear conversation about a Rubio-Cruz ticket. This was in the Los Angeles Times. I want you to keep that in mind here. So there's this writer on the Los Angeles Times who's out there saying, we've got to stop Trump. He would be a disaster. He's horrible for the country. The only way to stop him is a Rubio-Cruz ticket. Because they can pull them together and, they'll combine their votes and they'll be able to equal Donald Trump. They're not going to be able to beat him looking at the Nevada numbers. But the goal here now is to force the GOP nomination into a brokered convention where the party insiders will say, well, let's see, who do we want the candidate to be, and screw the Republican voters. Same thing we're seeing from the Democratic Party leadership. And this writer ends up saying that if these two factions could be unified, it might be enough to stop Trump. They're not even talking about what's best for the country and its people and the economy. It's always, we've got to stop Trump. He's a danger to our little insider game. Now, it is amazing how ignorant people who are paid to write for the corporate media can be. Now, to recap, for the benefit of those whose education is based on the Los Angeles Times, which means you're ignorant, the Constitution requires that the president must be a natural-born U.S. citizen. Natural born, as defined in the law at the time the Constitution was written, means born inside the country. Ted Cruz was born in Canada. His parents were both Canadian citizens at the time, and Canada did not legally recognize dual citizenship back when Ted Cruz was born. Cruz's mother had to renounce her U.S. citizenship to be a Canadian citizen. There are already 6 lawsuits against Cruz on this issue. Now, that brings you up to the present point. There's a little thing called the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. And this amendment was added to redefine how presidents and vice presidents were chosen. Prior to that amendment, the way the elections were run was whoever won the popular vote got to be president, second place got to be vice president. But it usually wound up with a president and vice president from opposing parties, and it led to a lot of confusion. So they began to say, well, since the primary reason to have a vice president is as a safety measure if the president dies in office or is incapacitated. They really should be of the same party and the same platform. And that's where this whole idea of a president and vice president running together came from. And so Congress passed the 12th Amendment. It was ratified by the states, and it imposes on the vice president the same constitutional requirements as the president. In other words, a natural-born U.S. citizen. Ted Cruz cannot be the vice president because of the possibility that he might be called on to succeed the president, and he's not eligible. And over at the Los Angeles Times, apparently we have all these people who are paid to write political columns who haven't actually read the Constitution. It boggles the mind. It's just amazing. Now, apparently last night on Coast to Coast AM radio, George Noory is saying that Rubio is being moved up in front of Cruz because of the growing concern over Cruz not being a natural-born U.S. citizen. The financial backers are starting to switch on over. They don't want this tangle up in court anymore. All right, let's see. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Randy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Did you see where Donald Trump walked into the Glenn Beck rally for Ted Cruz?
No, I didn't, actually.
Oh, my God. The whole room just ran over to Cruz or ran over to Trump. And Glenn Beck looked like he just bit into an apple and found half a worm.
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of interesting. I'm sure that Ted Cruz's supporters have to be thinking right now that Cruz may not be in this race much longer because of this issue. He's not a natural-born U.S. citizen. Okay? Yeah. And they're already thinking who they're going to switch to. Now, looking at the Nevada numbers, it would appear to me that the people who were going to vote for Bush, and by the way, some of them still did, even though he's out of the race, most of them seemed to go over to Trump. And Rubio and Cruz did not pick up very many of the former Bush supporters. And I think that's a growing trend. But what you're describing, that video, tells me exactly the same thing. I mean, people are just responding to Trump because he is not a polished, slick, career politician. We've had decades of those. Look at the condition the country is in. This is going to be the year of the outsider. And by the way, getting Trump in there is not enough. We're going to have to give Trump a Congress willing to work with him, and that means we have to kick out all the incumbents, kick out all the war hawks, kick out all the friends of Israel. If you love Israel so much, what are you doing in this country? Move to Tel Aviv, run for the Knesset, and do all your harm and damage over there. We need leaders in this country who are going to put America first, second, and third. That is a message we have to get out there this election year. Vote for the people who are best for America, not a foreign government. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thanks.
You have a good one, Mike.
Okay, and if you would send me the URL of that video, I'd love to see it. That would be a lot of fun.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. All right, we're going to let you go here. Now, Ted Cruz, you can tell he is feeling the pressure because now he's starting to do what Hillary does. He's flip-flopping on issues depending upon what audience he's talking to. And there was an article over here in thinkprogress.org talking about how all of a sudden Ted Cruz is getting tough on illegal immigrants. And he said, we're going to send law enforcement to knock on undocumented immigrants, and we're going to round them up for deportation, even if we have to arrest them in front of their children. So he's out there just trying, he's hit the pandering stage. And that's a warning sign. Now, getting on, well, we got to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, latest developments in Hillary land. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I got to tell you, this election season is going to be one for the history books. With all the shenanigans going on here. There was a big stink where apparently at one of the major caucus locations last night, there were some guys dressed up in Ku Klux Klan robes with pro-Donald Trump signs, and they were out there waving them at the crowd, and a bunch of people took pictures. And then they noticed the hands of these guys in the KKK robes were black. So obviously it was a hoax to try and make Donald Trump look bad. I mean, this is right out of the movie Blazing Saddles. Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd what they're trying to do to swing this election. And of course, the question is, who would do such a dastardly thing? And we all know who, because there is only one GOP candidate that Hillary knows she cannot beat, and that's Donald Trump. And remember, Hillary Clinton got a graduate-level course in election dirty tricks, because remember, she served on the committee investigating Watergate. And the actions of the committee to re-elect the president, Donald Segretti, all of that stuff. They had a word for it, but I can't say it here on the radio, or they'll take away our license to transmit. The movie, All the President's Men, with Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And they go into it. That stuff all happened. Hillary was on the committee investigating that, got fired for dishonesty and lying, but she learned all the things Richard Nixon's people did to get him reelected. And she's playing a lot of the same games right now. Okay, moving on to Hillary herself. Article coming out of Microsoft Network. The federal judge who is looking into some of the Judicial Watch complaints against Hillary, the State Department, and the email server has now ruled that State Department officials and Hillary Clinton's aides can be questioned under oath about whether Hillary was trying to use a private email system to skirt the open record laws. Clearly, she was skirting the laws. They're looking at intent. And, of course, they're still ignoring the issue of whether Hillary was allowing or even encouraging, even selling these top secrets from her server to foreign governments in exchange for very generous donations to her charitable foundation. But even this little bit is only going to increase the public's uncertainty about Hillary. And at this point, I would say that Hillary's success keeping up with Bernie Sanders is probably more vote fraud than genuine election, based on what we saw in Iowa, based on what we saw in New Hampshire, where they're catching the fraud on video. Now, MoveOn.org is mounting petitions in all of the coming primary and caucus states for all Democrats to basically sign a petition to tell the superdelegates to go with the popular vote. Now, the superdelegates are going to ignore that. They are there to basically tell you, the voter, to go jump in a lake. What you want doesn't matter anymore in the United States of America. This is a fascist dictatorship. Why aren't you just going along with that? But the petitions are out there and people are aware of what's going on. Now, speaking of political skullduggery, former Texas Governor Rick Perry has blamed the rather rapid demise of his presidential campaign on a criminal case that was brought against him. And sure enough, now that he is out of the race and not a threat to anybody, the courts in Texas just threw the case out. No problem. Indictment, taken back. Rick Perry didn't do anything wrong. And it seems to me like this lawsuit, remember we were talking about the new term of craft, lawfare, to use lawsuits as tools of war, and that appears to be what happened to Rick Perry. And once the lawsuit served its purpose, it went away. Now, we are hearing from Republicans in the Senate that they are absolutely going to refuse to consider any Obama Supreme Court nominee. There'll be no confirmation hearings. They're just going to dig in their heels and wait to see who's the president next year. And under the Constitution, the Senate is allowed to do that. They're playing by the rules for once in their lives. Now, this leaves the option open for Obama to do what is called a recess appointment. Wait for Congress to go into recess and do a recess appointment of a Supreme Court judge. Now, the recess appointment is temporary. It would only last to the end of the year, which is also the end of Obama's term in office. But Obama could do that to get himself a super liberal Supreme Court justice and make the changes to the law that he wants to make. But if Trump wins next year and puts in a super conservative Supreme Court justice, then all of that damage could be undone. Now, over in Syria, everybody is still giving lip service to this promise that there's going to be a partial truce in Syria starting midnight Friday. And they say partial because both Syria and Russia are saying this does not apply to the terrorist groups. This is a ceasefire between the government of Syria and what is called the moderate opposition, even though a main part of the moderate opposition, the Free Syria Army, 95% of whom are not from Syria, is already saying they're not going to go along with it. And it looks like this was all theater to make it look like John Kerry really wanted peace. And we tried so hard, but gee, we couldn't get it. So now we get to go on to Plan B, which is breaking Syria into little pieces. And Assad and his people get the dirt, and we get the oil, and we'll give the Kurds a little piece of Syria, along with a piece of Turkey and a piece of Iraq. Now, obviously, Damascus is condemning John Kerry's comments about breaking up their country, because it's not John Kerry's country, and it's not his place to say. And I'm sure that Russia is probably not thinking too much about that. Now, the EU Foreign Policy Chief, Federica Mogherini, is saying the European Union is opposed to partitioning Syria or Turkey or Iraq to form a Kurdish state, because they know it's probably going to be a trigger for a regional war in the area. So everybody thinks this is a bad idea. Everybody thinks it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea. You think it's a bad idea. And basically what it looks like, and this is an article out of Investment Watch Blog, the U.S. is just buying time with this ceasefire to try and figure out what they're going to do to get Syria back under their control and find a way to get the Russians to go home. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, things are getting a little tense over in Syria and Turkey. More evidence has surfaced showing the ISIS terrorists are working with the Turkish government across the Syria border. Terrorists receive new arms cargoes from Turkey. Erdogan is still talking about invading, but he may have a problem on his hands. The leadership of Turkey's military is saying they will refuse an order to invade Syria unless there is a United Nations Security Council resolution authorizing it, which is not going to happen because Russia will exercise its veto. And if Erdogan keeps insisting on attacking Syria, he may actually have a coup on his hands, one that's not under the control of the U.S. government. A for real regime change. It's getting very intense. We're seeing more protests in Kiev calling for the immediate resignation of the Poroshenko government. And isn't it funny how this demand for regime change in Ukraine isn't getting a whole lot of coverage on the American media? Back when it was our guys going on in there, oh, look how terrible Poroshenko was. He's sniping his own people, which turned out to be a lie. But now that the U.S. puppet is getting the old heave-ho, no media coverage. What's the U.S. going to do now? Invade Ukraine? Put their puppet back in like they're already having to do in Libya and Yemen? This thing's completely out of control. A speaker for the right sector in Ukraine is predicting a coup in Kiev and says there are going to be tanks in the streets of Kiev calling for Poroshenko and his junta to step down. And the reason for that is very simple. It's been 2 years since the U.S.-backed coup d'etat brought down Ukraine's elected legitimate government and installed Poroshenko. And it has been an absolute catastrophe for the people of Ukraine, as it is always an absolute catastrophe for the people of any nation subjected to U.S.-sponsored regime change. Because the U.S. isn't going into these countries for the benefit of the people on the ground. People on the ground are just there to have their wealth harvested, to sell products to get money from. They're just things. They're just chips in the game. The U.S. intervenes in these countries to lock them into the U.S. economy, to plunder their natural resources and their wealth. And the people of these countries are just sick and tired of it. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Robert in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, something else on Ted Cruz. His campaign chairman is Chad Sweet, and he's a co-founder of the Chertoff Group. He's in partner with Mike.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah. It doesn't stop there. He's also chief of staff of the Department of Homeland Security for a couple of years. He was vice president of Goldman Sachs from 1996 to 2006.
Mm-hmm.
He was the director of operations of the Central Intelligence Agency back in the 1990s. So just thought everybody should know about that. A little more dirt on Ted.
You know, here's what's really interesting. You have these people involved in Cruz's campaign who have these impressive credentials, even if you don't agree with what they're doing, and yet still thought it was okay to run this guy for the White House knowing he is ineligible under the Constitution. That's what's really scary about Cruz's supporters. They don't care about the Constitution. They just want what they want, and they want you to go along with it and stop asking impertinent questions. Same thing we get from the Hillary people. They know what she's done. They know about the scandals. They don't care. They want to win because they want to be on the winning side. That's a lousy way to run a country as personality cults. Going back to the start of this country, you read what Thomas Jefferson and the others wrote about the process of electing the leaders. You're supposed to think about it very carefully. You're supposed to look at the issues. You're supposed to think about your own personal welfare and that of your children. And pick somebody who's going to be working for you, not ripping off your land, your wealth to give to foreign governments and bankers and war machines. It almost makes me think like there ought to be, never mind ID for voting, there almost needs to be a competency exam. Like, you have to prove you've read the Constitution and understand it, then you're allowed to vote. Anything else, Robert?
Yeah, on Windows 10, there's a keylogging feature that defaults to recording your keystrokes, so folks with Windows 10 should go in and disable that feature.
Well, I have the best way to disable all these security features on a Windows 10 computer, and it involves getting a 6-pound sledgehammer from your local hardware store and pounding the machine into pulp.
Yeah. Now I've stayed with 7, so, but those who did downgrade, I should say,
yeah,
they should disable that. And there's
I'm going back to my VIC-20. It's the only computer in this house I know the NSA has not backdoored.
It also collects your speech and some other stuff too. So again, there's a way to disable that stuff.
Well,
so,
you could talk wrong in front of your computer. Can a Mambo dog face out to the banana patch, and that learning artificial intelligence system is going to say, what?
But then again, there's probably a way for the NSA to go back in behind it, turn it back on.
Of course there is. Of course there is. All the way, Bill Gates is now trying to backpedal from admitting that Microsoft was putting backdoors into Windows going back to 1999 when they stumbled across the NSA key. But we know that's how the NSA operates. We proved the NSA cannot break new methods of encryption. We proved that. 6 times, 6 challenges, not one of them was broken. We know that the NSA's preferred method of operation is to backdoor systems. And that goes all the way back to the Enigma machine. At the end of World War II, the reason they destroyed all the records of the work at Bletchley Park was they were giving presents. Britain and the United States were giving presents of captured German Enigma machines to friendly governments to use without telling them that the messages written on those machines could now be read by British intelligence. There was a big scandal in Europe, Crypto AG, which was selling an updated version of Enigma. And it basically, if you go back to the book Puzzle Palace, it came out that the NSA paid the owner of the company a huge sum of money to put a backdoor into the machine. DES came out with the work reduction packet. Clipper had the law enforcement assistance field. Nothing is allowed out there for you to use that the government cannot peek into to steal your business secrets, abuse themselves over naked pictures of your spouses and children. That's what it's there for. And they can't do a thing about real criminals and real terrorists. The NSA's impotence in the face of all the cybercrime proves that. They're here to watch you, to plunder your business secrets, to go to their stockbroker and say, wow, this guy's getting ready to launch a new product. I want to buy some shares of his stock, which, by the way, is called insider trading. And some of these intelligence people have actually been caught and arrested and sent to prison for insider trading based on information they're stealing from your computers. Not enough, unfortunately, because it's still going on. But it's completely out of control. And now we're hearing from Ben Swan and John McAfee, the government wants to ban encryption entirely. Use a secret decoder ring, go to jail. Seems to be the new attitude coming out of the fascist United States of America. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Robert, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're looking at possible regime changes not being orchestrated by the U.S. government taking place in hotspots, whether it's Ankara or Kiev. And Kiev does look like there's going to be a new Maidan to kick out Poroshenko and his people. And it's going to put the United States and the European Union in a very awkward situation because the incoming government's probably going to reach out, shake hands with those Eastern Ukrainian republics and say, let's do what Crimea did. Let's have a referendum and say we want to merge with Russia, and we'll ask Putin really nice. Putin's probably going to say yes. And under international law, there isn't anything the United States can legally do about it, which means their only option is, we've got to nuke Moscow, we've got to just kill everybody until they agree to go along with us. Anyway, Saudi Arabia is deploying combat aircraft to Turkey. Everybody wants a war, except they want somebody else's kids to die in it. I think what we ought to do, really, and I've mentioned this before, let's go around and grab all of these people who seem to think war is a good idea, like John McCain, Barack Obama, and Angela Merkel, and Erdogan, the Saudi king, Salman, and let's put them in a really big arena someplace, give them each a chainsaw, and whoever comes out with the most bodily parts intact gets to rule the world. And we could sell the pay-per-view rights on this, tickets, promotional items, merchandising. We could pay off the global debt from this. No, we couldn't, because all the new money created by the private central banks is still another loan at interest. It's designed that way. Private central banking is designed so that you can never, ever, ever break free of it. Unless you do what Andrew Jackson did, which is to just shut the bank down, or you do what King Philip IV did. You torture and kill the bankers. Now, France has deployed some of their forces to Libya, supposedly to deal with the crisis of ISIS. There's a song title in there, I'm sure, somewhere. No, what's going on? The renewed U.S. bombing, the renewed troops are on the ground, is because the people of Libya refuse to accept their U.S.-appointed puppet rulers, a.k.a. the internationally recognized government of the country. See, here's a little funny thing. The only group with the moral right to recognize a government are the people of Libya. It's called self-determination. Nobody else on the planet has a right to go into a country and say, we have decided this is your legitimate government, we all agreed, it's your government, and you should just accept it. It's absurd. It's a very blatant piece of propaganda. The internationally recognized government of Libya. The puppet regime. It's not recognized by the people of Libya. Over in Yemen, their forces have destroyed their 10th Saudi warship, I imagine they're having a little battleship-shaped cake with 10 candles on it to celebrate. But Saudi Arabia is not doing very well in Yemen, which is why a lot of the Saudi military leadership is saying, are you really sure you want to go into Syria? Because they're a lot tougher than Yemen. Over in Iraq, their forces are continuing to battle the U.S.-sponsored terrorists in Mosul, despite increasing U.S. pressure to back off and not interfere anymore. The U.S. has just announced new military bases in the Anbar province. We're going back into Iraq. And needless to say, the champagne corks are popping over at the U.S. military contractors. We're going back to Iraq. There's going to be money. We're going to have fun. Get all this money, and we don't even have to worry what we're doing with it. Do you know that in the wars in Iraq so far, we've lost more U.S. troops to Halliburton than we have to the Iraqis? Exposure to chemical weapons, poor quality water. Then you have the suicides on top of that. Basically what it comes down to right now, there are 30 conflicts going on around the world right now trying to find a way to glue together into the New World War. In the name of fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which we know work for the United States, the U.S. government is now bombing 7 different countries. At some point, somebody's going to have to stand up and say, yeah, I think it is a world war. Really, I think so. I think we qualify as a world war. Actually, we do, because under U.S. military doctrine, a world war is any war in which the U.S. is fighting on multiple fronts in multiple countries on at least 2 different continents. And we're there. Africa and Asia. And now gearing up in China. The Pentagon wants to deploy mobile artillery near the South China Sea, going in there to show how butch they are. Now, as you know, the U.S. has been trying to gin up a war against North Korea as a backdoor to a war with China, because nobody cares about North Korea. They don't have anything. What they're looking for is a route to the real war they want, which is China. Just the way that Roosevelt, used Japan to get the U.S. into the war against Nazi Germany. It's called a backdoor. So we've got this top U.S. commander who's out here. Admiral Harry Harris, commander of the U.S. Pacific Command, local boy, he lives on this island, and basically saying that military action against North Korea is possible because North Korea launched a rocket. And it was a scientific mission, and it actually didn't work, but it could be used to hurl nuclear bombs. See, now the excuse to go to war against anybody is because of what they might do somewhere down the road. And we know that there is this massive military exercise between the U.S. and South Korea that's going to be rattling their sabers at North Korea. North Korea is saying they're going to rattle their sabers back. And we have the U.S. Navy saying, yes, we have to go in and deal with North Korea. The U.S. is going to lose this war. And the bankers who are behind it all, they don't care. They make money off of both sides. Bankers love war. They don't care which side wins or loses. That's why you had all these Wall Street financiers backing the rise of Nazi Germany. They wanted a major war. And it didn't matter who wins or loses, because they make money on both sides. They loan them the money to fight the war. Then when it's all over, they loan them more money to rebuild what was destroyed in the war. And at the end of this scam, ordinary people like you and I, we have sort of what we had before, maybe a little less, and the graveyards are a lot bigger, and we're back on the debt hook to these private central banks for another 100 years. Now, there's an interesting article that came out of hotair.com, and it's mentioning something I've talked about before. And the article is entitled, "We May Be Reaching the End of the Dominance of U.S. Aircraft Carriers." And we've talked about this before. Going into World War II, carriers were considered kind of a nice-to-have, interesting thing. But World War II, the war in the oceans was going to be decided with the battleships. And then, of course, you had the disasters of the Bismarck, the Hood, and the proof that air superiority over these battleships, which had lightly armored horizontal spaces, proved the dominance of the carrier. Well, now we're in an age of intelligent weapons, and there is a concern that the carriers are very tempting, very expensive targets, and they may not even be that effective any longer. And the U.S. may be making a strategic mistake betting on the aircraft carriers going into World War III the way they bet on the battleships going into World War II. And we got out of that war by the skin of our teeth. Every simulation I've ever seen run of the Battle of Midway has Japan winning. The U.S. prevailed at Midway by just amazing strokes of luck. And you cannot rely on luck when you're planning a battle. You shouldn't rely on luck. If you're relying on good fortune when you're planning a war, you are already there to lose. And that's also from Sun Tzu in The Art of War. All right, we got to take a break here for our first top of the hour news and commercials. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about some of Russia's latest generation weaponry on display and how it is outclassing the latest and greatest from the U.S. military-industrial complex. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome to our show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a call waiting. I'm going to get to you in just a minute, but I really feel I must respond to Loretta Lynch, because the official story is it's just the one phone, just the one time. These people were really icky. We have a right to look in there. And yeah, they do. The problem is, as Apple has pointed out, what the FBI is asking for is a key to everybody's phone. That's like going into a neighborhood and saying, we know that the person living in this house did bad things, therefore you must all leave your doors unlocked so we can peek at you. And that is definitely not constitutional. And what it really comes on down to is purely a matter of trust. If we, the people of this country, could safely trust the government to play by the rules, I don't think anybody would be in much of a fuss. The problem is the government isn't playing by the rules. They have repeatedly proven themselves not worthy of the trust of we the people. And that's what it comes down to. We don't trust the government. The government lies. The government steals our data to give to cronies. The government is abusing themselves to naked pictures of our significant others. And we know that the government can't actually find real criminals and real terrorists. So this is all about the government watching you, and we don't like that. And under the Fourth Amendment, we don't have to like it. And so the bottom line is we have to adopt a zero-tolerance policy. We have to draw the line in the sand. If you, the government, are not following the rules in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, I don't recognize you as legal or legitimate, and you can talk until the cows come home. I am not listening to you anymore. And no, you don't get to dig through my business secrets to find tasty little bits to take to your stockbroker. You're not allowed to do that. I don't recognize your authority to plunder my business information for your own personal gain. We should be very angry about this. The government is trying to stake us out on the ground naked so they can walk by and help themselves to our wallets and our personal lives whenever they want. Whether it's the supermarket, so-called discount cards, now the drugstores are all having, they want to be able to track everything you're buying to make sure you're not buying things that could be used to make bad stuff. This from a government that has been torturing people to death to find nuclear weapons that never existed. Concentration camps. We, the people, are in the moral and legal right. It is the federal government that is in violation of international law, international treaty, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and its own U.S. laws. And we don't have to make it easier for them to continue acting as criminals. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab some calls. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. 2 quick points I wanted to say before I get to my initial reason why I'm calling. But one is there's another Holocaust movie that came out, right, where there's a lot of boycott and backlash against Israel. Mm-hmm. And they always seem to do that.
Oh, of course they do. Of course, Israel is in Hollywood trying to get everybody to make new Nazi movies. Remember that spoof I put out there, Santa Claus versus the Nazis, and then it turned out somebody was actually going to try and make one. I mean, that's how absurd I have to repost that article. It's a lot of fun to look at. Just how they try and hammer that. And, of course, Netanyahu is now giving free trips to Israel worth about $50,000 each to all of the Oscar nominees, not just the winners, the nominees. Anybody who got nominated for an Academy Award is getting a free trip to Israel because Netanyahu wants to use the star power to help oppose criticism of Israel for their crimes against their neighbors and the Palestinians. Personally, at this point, I don't plan on seeing any movie that's been Oscar nominated for any acting category at all. I'm just not interested. It's probably a remake of something I've seen 16 times before anyway.
And another point on Trump. Now, Fox is reportedly a Republican station, and for them to see a top Republican candidate take over the country, and for them not to they're always going against them, that's got to tell you something.
Well, Fox is part of the establishment Republicans,
exactly.
And Trump is not part of that. And that's what's going on. Fox's mission is out there to get us going back to the same insider elite that has wrecked this country over the last couple of decades, and go on trusting them that they're all of a sudden going to change what they're doing. No, they're not. If we stick with the same politicians that we have had for the last 30 years, things are just going to keep on going the same direction they've been going for 30 years. Downward for you and I, and upward for the money junkies.
Yeah, you think they'd be excited to see a candidate who's Republican that's being so popular, but they're doing all they can to denounce him.
Because he's not their kind of Republican. He's
right.
a real conservative. He's actually a paleo-conservative, much like I am. But he won't go along with what Wall Street wants. He won't go along with the money junkies. And I mean, they even came out at one time and said, well, he's not a real Republican because he won't take money from the Wall Street bankers.
Exactly. Now, my initial question is, okay, if they were to install this cashless society, and I hope they don't, what would be a reason to have a bank?
We'll see. Because the banks are where your wealth is being kept for you, for which they will charge you a hefty fee and negative interest rates. The banks are going to be more plentiful and everywhere because nobody's allowed to have money in their pocket or in their home anymore. So that's a big boost for the banks, and that's why it's being done, to try and prop the banks up just a little bit longer. And they're trying to ban cash. They want to ban physical silver and physical gold. They want to ban anything that can be a store of value outside of the bank's control. And as we found out from that leaked document from a Morgan Stanley meeting, the real reason for banning cash is to trap your money in the banks so that they can put negative interest rates on it. So if you deposit $100 in the bank today in a savings account, a year from now, you'll have $95. That's
why would I have a bank protect my electronic digits in the future?
Because they're going to have, well, I mean, that's how banks handle money anyway. I mean, there's actually very little paper currency and coinage. Most of the wealth of the country is already stored as digital bits in the banks. What they're simply saying is, we don't need the paper and the coins anymore. You just need a plastic card. But it's there to prevent a run on the banks. You're not going to be able to go in and demand your money back in cash. They're just going to say, well, all you can do is move it to another bank. And at that point, that other bank will just ship it back to wherever it's needed. And this is an assault on our freedom to have our own wealth that we have earned with our own two hands, to spend it where we want, to spend it anonymously to protect our right of privacy. If I'm going to stop on the way home from work and get a jelly donut, break my diet today, it's nobody's business. And I don't want the government to know about that jelly donut. The government doesn't have any business knowing about the jelly donut.
If they were to have a cashless society, it would be complete control. If we were to protest...
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. You speak out against the government, and all of a sudden there's a strange technical malfunction with your plastic card, and you don't get to eat that night.
Wow, that's just a scary situation. I can't even conceive something like that happening. But you can see where they're going with all this, the ban of the $100 bills, and next will be 50, then 20, then 5, then 1s.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and they're banning the hundreds to sort of get this thing going slowly, saying, well, see, this is because of crime and terror and everything. Really? HSBC was laundering all those drug lords and terrorists' money inside their computers. Cash didn't have anything to do with it. This is an attack on our freedom to use our own wealth the way we see fit. That's what it is. This is they're turning us into their slaves. That's the simple. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Steve. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We've got a couple of calls waiting. I'm going to get to in just a minute, but I want to get these two stories out of the way here. Russia is now starting to build and deploy its internal version of their fifth-generation fighter, the T-50. They're going to build one for export starting in 2020, but they're building for their own use right now. This aircraft just set a world record in sustained rate of climb. That was a speed of 384 meters per second, straight up vertical climb. In other words, starting at sea level, it would be at the top of Mount Everest in 23 seconds. The F-35 can't do that. And by the way, remember last week when Obama sent 4 F-22 stealth fighters, you know, the ones that are asphyxiating their pilots, to fly around near the border with North Korea as a warning. And China called up and said, you do know we can see these on the radar, right? Just thought you'd want to know. The military-industrial complex is producing crud. It's very expensive crud. It looks impressive in the sales brochures. Meanwhile, over at the International Investigation into the Crash of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, they've hit a major roadblock. The Dutch government prosecutors who were there trying to find a way to blame Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 on Russia are saying that the evidence provided by the United States doesn't really hold up to the standards that would be required for any kind of a prosecution in international court. And at this point, the official report is going to simply say, we're not really sure. Which I guess is as good a cover-up as any. I still think that Poroshenko sent up a fighter to shoot down Putin's presidential aircraft, which was in the same area at the same time, and looks an awful lot like the Malaysian Airlines livery. And Putin was coming back from a 6-day trip in South America, and the pilot hit the wrong aircraft. Oh, no, the separatists shot it down. Putin shot it down. You know, the space aliens killed it. All right, let's grab a couple of phone calls here. Ralph in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Hello, Mike?
Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, let me ask you a question. What agenda would Donald Trump have if he wins the White House concerning Puerto Rico? I mean, even though he's basically blaspheming Mexicans, and what about Puerto Ricans? What agenda does he have for Puerto Rico, even though the island's going bankrupt, it's becoming like a Greece of the Caribbean? What would you think happened? You know, we got thousands of Puerto Ricans that leave in the island, headed inwards towards the United States, like to Florida, at Georgia.
Okay, well, let me respond here. I don't want to be out here putting words in Donald Trump's mouth. The first thing you need to remember is Donald Trump is not bashing all Mexicans or all Puerto Ricans or all Central Americans. His issue are illegal immigrants, and he is right to be concerned about that. Every nation has a right to control their borders and decide who comes in and who comes out. Donald Trump is talking about the people who sneak in here illegally, and now Ted Cruz is hopping on that bandwagon as well. Now, as far as Puerto Rico is concerned, I'm not going to speculate what Trump is going to do, but I think one of two things has to happen. Puerto Rico has been this territory/possession of the United States for long enough. Either they should just be granted their independence and become a nation on their own, or go ahead and make them a state. Of the two, I think it's time to just grant them their independence. Let them solve their own problems. We got enough in our own country to take care of. We should stop having these far-flung territories around the globe. That's kind of an outdated concept. I think Puerto Rico should be the nation of the Republic of Puerto Rico. All of these little possessions. It's time to give them their independence.
Even Guam, right?
Even Guam.
Wow. So the reality is that all these islands that they took over, you should probably give Puerto Rico back to Juan Carlos of Spain, right?
No, give Puerto Rico back to the Puerto Rican people.
Exactly, but it's a done deal. I think what's going to happen? I mean, economically, how can this survive without the United States? It couldn't survive.
Well, they could rebuild their tourism. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful place, Puerto Rico, and there's a lot of historical sites there. They just need to be cleaned up. I mean, there's that, there's all kinds of stuff for Puerto Rico. As some of the roads need to be made safer, need to have more guardrails. But Puerto Rico could be a very nice tourist destination. Certainly, given the current economy, it's a very inexpensive place to visit. Less expensive than pretty much anywhere else in the Caribbean right now.
It's the same thing with Cuba. Why would Obama keep meddling in the Cuban affairs also? It's the same thing, right?
Well, they're starting to de-link. I mean, we've dropped this whole embargo thing. We're normalizing relations now. Obama's going to shut down Guantanamo, which has been a major thorn in the side of Cuba. That's the only reason the U.S. maintained that base down there in Guantanamo, was to basically give the finger to Fidel Castro. And that's outdated. It's time to shut it down. There's nothing there except, insult to Cuba. We need to start pulling back from the rest of the world and come home and rebuild our nation. Instead of spending all of our money on fortifications and stuff all over the world to garrison the place, we need to bring our money back here and start rebuilding our nation, rebuilding its manufacturing, bringing back safe, healthy, organic agricultural produce that the rest of the world wants to buy. I love Trump's slogan. We can make America great again. We just have to stop listening to these money junkies who see war and conquest as the shortcut to riches and don't care what it does to the rest of the world.
Well, I'll tell you one thing: Trump didn't do a good job in my backyard over in Atlantic City, and it's becoming Atlantic City, New Jersey is becoming it became a ghost town.
That wasn't Trump. That wasn't Trump. Trump built it up at a time when the economy could support a lot of recreational gambling and tourism to New Jersey. When the economy dried up, the customers went away. You can't blame Trump for that. That rests firmly on the private central banks and Wall Street money junkies.
And also his college, Trump University. That's a lot of students that when you roll up, they already say that was a fraud.
Well, everybody's out there saying Trump is a fraud because of this and that, and apparently there's a trial coming up. But take a lesson from what happened to Rick Perry. He got hit with this accusation of abuse of power, and it dragged him into court and got him out of the race. And now that he's out of the race, they throw the case out of court. That tells you how these things are done. Thank you for the call. I'm going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Mo, actually, I'm probably going to have to keep you through the commercial break, but you can get started for the next 10 seconds.
Good. I got just a couple questions. First of all, I'll stay with Trump. I don't know if you caught the latest news, Rom. They got the tag dog Romney on him on Fox News.
Okay, let's take a break here. 4 minutes for commercials. We'll talk about this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the phones to Mo in Florida, and you were talking about what Fox News is saying about Trump this week. Mo, are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing Mo, so I'm going to put Mo back on hold, and we'll come back and try in a little bit. It's rather interesting. Apparently, everybody is still going over this whole thing about does Hillary lie and how she was evasive on that question. She has a right to be. We know she's lied. We've caught her at it so many times. And they gave her a second chance to come out and said, I'm not lying, and she passed on that. If I'm lying, may God strike me a glancing blow, or something like that. Now, apparently Hillary is ducking the issue of these highly paid speeches she made to Wall Street, saying that she shouldn't be required to show transcripts of these speeches, which were done as Hillary, as a private citizen, talking to all these Wall Street banks. And she says she'll do it when all the other candidates do exactly the same thing because they're out there making speeches. And I don't think it even matters what's in the speeches any longer. It is the evasiveness that we are seeing on display here that is turning people off to Hillary. I absolutely don't believe she's doing that well in the primaries and caucuses, if the elections were being honest. She can't be. When you look at all these polls of public opinion about Hillary, it doesn't line up with the numbers we're being told she's getting. All right, let's see if Mo in Florida came back. Mo, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Why don't you pick up where you left off before the commercial break?
I was just going to mention just the big breaking bombshell on Fox News. They dug up Romney to come out as an attack dog. I'm not as much as for Trump as you are, but because I'm an old Ron Paul guy. But they're talking about his back taxes and not showing him the last couple of years. They're impugning his donations to the disabled veterans. And I mean, it's Romney's calling it a bombshell. It's all over the news. So I know they got Romney for his taxes, and maybe it's a sore point, but you can just tell they seem very, very desperate. And I don't know. I didn't know if you'd heard about this, but
I hadn't. And frankly, if Mitt Romney's opening his mouth, I'm not interested. I mean, all the stuff that we had to deal with from him during his last run at the White House. And there's this amazing documentary that was out there when Mitt Romney came to town talking about how he has made his money going in and buying companies, firing all the workers, and then just selling off the assets. And that's how he's made his money. And he's left just absolute economic devastation in his wake. And this is the best they can get to come up against Donald Trump? I don't think so. None of us has a perfect record or a perfect life. Okay?
No, I agree with you. But one more thing.
Okay.
One more thing, if I could just, and I know I'll get your condolences because I'm a year older than you. But do you remember the show Green Acres?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Mr. Haney, Pat Bertram?
Yes, I remember.
If you get a chance to watch it and you look at Mr. Haney, he doesn't only look like Cruz. He talks and sounds exactly like him. He's a crook.
Well, he should sue Cruz for copyright infringement then, I think.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Okay, let's see. Now then, interesting little article came out over at the Daily Bell talking about the upcoming referendum in Britain in June, which, to judge by comments on the ground, is overwhelmingly going to be voting for separation from the European Union. But as you know, the globalists inside the British government, Cameron, first and foremost, they want to weld the British Empire to the European Union. They want to enslave the British people to the European Central Bank. The British people have had it. They're seeing all this money taken from them and sent to Brussels, and nothing is coming back except endless, bizarre, trivial laws. You have to sell bananas only in bunches of so many. I mean, they're down there actually. The banana police are running around the streets of London saying, there are too many bananas in that, but there aren't enough. We are here to enforce conformity on the bananas. The British people are sick and tired of it. But according to this article, they're sounding a warning, and it's a legitimate one, especially when you remember how the Scottish people were cheated of their independence in that referendum. The election fraud was just in everybody's face. Everybody knows what happened. And this article is saying, yeah, the British government is going to do it again. They want what they want. What the people want is simply not relevant any longer. This is a new age of empire. And what ordinary people want absolutely does not matter. I'm sure Ceausescu felt exactly the same way 3 weeks before he was machine gunned to death on Romanian national TV. Louis XVI felt the same way. So did Mussolini. So did Charles I. Just want to put in a word of caution that people can only be pushed so far. Now, you remember back during this whole brouhaha in France about, there's terrorism and we've got to take away freedom of speech. You can't criticize Israel. You can make fun of the Muslims and Christians all you want. But you can't talk about Israel. And there was this Jewish teacher who claimed that he was attacked by ISIS jihadists. And was a big story. Oh, ISIS is in France, be afraid and everything. Apparently he got arrested earlier today because he just made the story up. It was another hate crime hoax. Oh, we're victims, feel sorry for us. Oh, always feel sorry for us, while we slap the rest of the world around. It's amazing here. Oh, here's a little footnote for you Catholics. Apparently, the pregnant secretary of Pope Francis was found dead in her Rome apartment, which is very close to the Pope's digs. He's not actually living in the papal palace. He's living in one of the smaller establishments in the name of austerity. And she got an autopsy. There was no sign of foul play, but she got an autopsy. Why do pregnant secretaries get autopsies and Supreme Court judges not? Question I would like to ask. Students over at McGill University have voted overwhelmingly to support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Netanyahu's already out there screaming, you're Jew haters, you're anti-Semites, you want Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies, blah, 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 blah. We already talked about the Oscar nominees. And apparently, two of the nominees, Mark Rylance and Asif Kapadia, have already promised never to visit Israel professionally. And as I said before, if these Oscar nominees take these free trips and agree to be used by Israel for propaganda, then I, for one, don't plan on watching any of their movies. Not even when they come on free on the cable here. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, that guy was saying at Fox News, like Mitt Romney, how vicious they're getting Donald Trump. I think making stuff up. On my way home from work this morning, I was listening just to see what the enemy was saying, about, because I know how he hates Trump. I was listening to that fool Glenn Beck. And Beck was actually accusing Trump supporters of being like brown shirts. And he was really, for all intents and purposes, comparing Trump to Adolf Hitler, really.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are getting, these people are getting desperate. I mean, Glenn Beck is a worm. This guy pretends he's some kind of like a holy roller, like kind of a prophet or something. In reality, he's just a mentally ill demagogue.
Okay, Mark, we're going to have to put you on hold for 4 minutes. Don't go away. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back here to Mark in North Carolina. And before I hand the microphone back to you, basically at this point, the GOP race for the White House is down to three players: Trump, Cruz, and Rubio. Cruz is starting to fade as concern about his eligibility to be president or vice president continues to spread. Money and support is shifting from Cruz, some to Rubio, some to Donald Trump. Now, if the GOP, aided by their propaganda arm, Fox News, is able to get Trump out of the race, either with a brokered convention or they shoot him, that leaves Rubio as the Republican nominee going into November. Rubio cannot beat Hillary Clinton. We are in a situation where the Republican Party is so scared of Donald Trump, they are willing to hand the White House to Hillary Clinton.
You're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah, and that is what should be alarming all Republican voters right now. Is the party truly representing what you want? And if not, it's time to stop supporting that party. Same thing for the Democrats. With the superdelegates, is the Democratic Party leadership representing the desires of the Democratic voters? And if not, it's time to bail. And by the way, a lot of Americans today do not belong to either the Republican or Democratic Party because of this behavior we've seen time after time of the party leadership saying, look, you're just here to sign checks and do what we tell you. Democracy. Where did you ever get an idea like that?
I don't belong to any party, but as far as what I said about Glenn Beck goes, he also put down the Breitbart people, especially Steve Bannon,
yes.
Saying they're, this guy's out of control and saying they want to be Roger Ailes. They're not our Roger Ailes, but I believe that Beck is still really connected to Fox News. He'll go on once in a while, and what's that woman's name? Megyn Kelly. He'll
yes.
go on with Bill O'Reilly. This guy is nothing but
a sorry, yeah, and he's a sorry punk, okay? I think he's severely mentally disturbed. Somehow he's made it rich. Goes to show you don't have to have much talent to make.
Well, you know, if you are a convincing liar, you can make a lot of money in corporate media.
Yeah. I mean, this guy's worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
Now. It's unbelievable. He's got his own plane. He brags that he pays $1 million a year for his security. It makes him seem, you know. Meanwhile, a guy like you or a guy like Alex Jones, you don't have any security but yourself, you know. You guys.
I think Alex Jones probably has a lot more security than I do. You know, I'm not even allowed to have a dog here in the condo, which is a shame because I like dogs.
I mean, he's got all those guns and stuff like that. I mean,
yes.
That's the security. But the fact of the matter is, as far as that goes, he is definitely, you know, he's out of control. I mean, you know, calling the supporters of Trump brown shirt, okay, and saying they're threatening him and they're threatening that woman that works for him, that's Trump there. What's her name? Dana Lausch.
Yeah. Well, you're right. It's getting hysterical. I mean, that stunt with the black guys dressed up as KKK, you know, with I support Donald Trump signs. It's getting ridiculous. And like I said, probably political science students are going to be studying this year's election, you know, for a long time to come. I think they're going to outdo Richard Nixon's creep by the time we're done with all of this. And I am very, very concerned that the people who are opposed to Donald Trump are desperate enough to take a shot at him, even knowing that the majority of the American people are going to know it was a political assassination and wasn't because some crazed, lone nut, Uber driver, Palestinian, Syrian, Iranian, Chinese, Russian kook who was not on prescription antidepressants, you know, did it.
Yeah. If they kill him, I think that's the start of a civil war.
Well, I wouldn't stop you. I wouldn't stop you. Okay?
All right. I mean, that would be the last straw.
All right. I'm in agreement with you on that one. I think the American people are realizing just how out of control the federal government and political system have become and how we've been completely cut off. This is not the nation the state schools told us we lived in, where we have a voice in choosing the candidates and choosing the leaders, and it's being rubbed in our faces. No, what you want doesn't matter. Our rich friends want these people to run the country to make them richer, and you might as well just get used to it. No, I'm not getting used to it.
The United States was, you know, and we're becoming like the Soviet Union. That's what really happens, like that movie Trading Places, you know?
Yeah, it's like that. Actually, there are a lot of parallels to the Soviet Union. Especially under Stalin, there's a lot of parallels to Italy under Mussolini. There's a lot of parallels to Germany under the Nazis happening right now, and we need to open our eyes and confront that. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Leroy in Georgia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
What's going on, Mike? I got a question, man, about Cruz's eligibility.
Yeah.
I was talking to this Shield on another radio show, and they were saying that, like you said, that people are challenging it, and that he has a right to run because his mother is American. So I called in and I asked him, okay, so if that's true, then why did Senator McCain have to go to the Senate and get special permission to run in 2012, 2000, whenever?
Well, because he was born in the Canal Zone, and
I know.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off, Mike, but I know that. And the other question was, if it doesn't matter, then why doesn't the person that's the president now produce a real birth certificate?
Well, now, wait a minute. Let's not blur the two, because Barack Obama, the claim that Barack Obama was not a U.S. citizen, has now been admitted to have been a hoax perpetrated by Hillary's campaign in 2008. Now, I live on the island of Oahu. I know a lot of people who knew Obama as a child. We had one of his school teachers in here for an interview. And Obama was born here, and that made him a natural-born citizen. The Washington Post acknowledged that that whole thing about Obama's birth was a hoax by the Hillary campaign. So let's not blur the two, okay, because that was a hoax. Now, getting on to Ted Cruz. There is no question that Ted Cruz was born in Canada and therefore does not satisfy the natural-born requirement to be President of the United States of America. There is also the issue that, as it turns out, when Ted Cruz was born, his parents had renounced their Cuban and American citizenships to become Canadian citizens. So you can't say because Cruz's mother was born in Delaware that makes him a citizen. No, she had stopped being a U.S. citizen when Ted Cruz came along.
One more question.
Yeah.
Okay, to go back to Obama. Okay, so I've heard reports that state that the place that is said to be where he was born in Hawaii was not named that when he was born. That it was something different. Yeah. And they have posted I've heard reports that a birth certificate was posted on the White House government website, and that people have pulled that apart and shown that to be false.
Okay. All right. Hang on a minute. Okay. First of all, go to the top of my website, WhatReallyHappened.com, and you will see an article permanently linked there, Obama the Love Child, in which all of this goes on out. Now, the reason there was a second birth certificate, and this was very common in the 1960s, Obama's real father was not Barack Obama Sr. or even Barry Soetoro. It was Frank Marshall Davis. And back then, there were so many love children floating around from the 60s, it was easier to issue a new birth certificate with the corrected name than to go through the process of adopting a child. And that was the reason for the second birth certificate. Now, as far as that birth certificate appearing to have layers, that was done because somebody scanned it into Adobe Illustrator, which automatically vectorizes and breaks things apart. That's a software glitch issue. But go to my website, Obama the Love Child. I'm going to go ahead and post it to the main page during this upcoming news break. We have been through this all before, and the Washington Post has confirmed this was a hoax played by Hillary Clinton in 2008. So it is inappropriate to try and compare the Obama birther controversy with Ted Cruz, who admits he was born in Canada. So, there's no gray area there. We'll be right back after news and commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to skip forward here a little bit, getting into the ClimateGate stuff. As you're probably aware if you live there, but not if you're watching the corporate media, there is a major storm that is hitting the Midwest, a lot of snow, a lot of ice. We are now hearing the National Weather Service has just issued tornado warnings for Washington, D.C. Now, I sort of hope it doesn't happen. I've never been to Washington, D.C. I'd like to visit someday, look at my ancestor's signature on the Declaration, visit some of those cool museums. On the other hand, I think probably most of us could live without Congress. So we'll see what happens there. Also, Baltimore. If you're in Baltimore, keep an eye out. Okay, now then. Benjamin Netanyahu is on the warpath against anybody daring to say bad things about Israel. He's going to go on doing the bad things. He just doesn't think you should talk about it. Now he's on the warpath up in Britain, telling the government they have to start removing anti-Israel posters. And the British government is saying, yes, master, yeah, absolutely, master. We will remove all the posters that say terrible things about our Lord and Master Israel. Okay, let's see. We were talking about the banning of cash, and it's kind of weird. The central bankers are saying the reason to outlaw cash is to stop criminals. Actually, it's to make it easier for the criminals to make more money off of us, because they want to lock your money in their banks where they can help themselves to it with negative interest rates. They're outlawing cash to help the criminals, in particular the criminals who own the banks. And all of this is caused by that design flaw in the model of private central banks, which create money out of thin air and then loan it into circulation at interest, creating more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the debt grows so large it crashes the system. And along the way, the bankers wind up owning the hard assets of a nation, and the people are left with nothing but poverty and pieces of paper with ink all over it. It's designed that way, to hold you as permanent slaves to the money junkies. Now, over in Greece, They've been trying to get everybody on digital money ever since it started falling apart over there. And their excuse is, well, we've got to stop people from evading taxes here, and we have to raise the taxes to pay for the tax enforcement system. The people of Greece are already being taxed very heavily, and like the people of Great Britain, they're very angry that their money is being taken away from them, and they get nothing back for it. Especially in recognition that half of Greece's debt problem was created through fraud and deception by Papandreou and Goldman Sachs. But the attitude of the IMF, Christine Lagarde herself has said this: we don't care if the debt was created through fraud, you, the people, are responsible for it. I don't think so. I think government fraud that creates debt fits the definition of odious debt. But the money junkies don't care. They just want you to be their debt slaves. Now, the good news is, over in Greece, the push for cashless society has failed miserably. Businesses don't want to buy new equipment. They can't afford the terminals. They can't afford the new computer infrastructure to make it all work. They prefer using cash. And I'll tell you what's going to happen if they try and do a cashless society here in the United States. People aren't going to turn their bills in. They're going to hoard all the paper money they can. And they're going to go on using it, behind the scenes. So it won't accomplish its real goal. People are going to just go on having a underground, cash-based economy. And what's the government going to come on and do? Threaten you with jail for having a Federal Reserve paper note? Have we really reached that degree of tyranny and oppression? Now, over in Japan is an indicator of what's going to happen as they push forward on this cashless society so that the banks can help themselves to your wealth whenever they feel like it. Their safe sales of home safes are soaring in Japan. People are pulling their money out of the banks while they still can to get away from the negative interest rate problem. I mean, can you realize the absurdity of all this? The government is going to tell you that you must keep your money in the bank and you must allow the bank to take part of it to keep themselves solvent. That's what you're being told by your government. By the way, if you're planning on buying a home safe, and I think you should, you need to be aware the new Sentry electronic fire safe can be opened in mere seconds with a powerful magnet, and it leaves no trace what happened. But it looks good, and that's all that really matters. You give us your money, we give you something that looks like a safe. It's amazing. When I was a magician and I did a little escape work, I learned locksmithing from a very, very expert escapologist. And my education was cut off short because it turned out this guy, when he wasn't doing magic shows, was a jewel thief. But I learned a lot from him. All right, getting on back to more serious things. Story coming out of shtfplan.com. The crumbling American economy is headed for Venezuela-style collapse. The cash is worthless. There is nothing in the stores to buy. At that point, you're going to see a civic uprising. Hungry people get desperate. And by the way, I don't know about where you are. We have noticed here in Hawaii that all of a sudden the store shelves are starting to have these really large empty gaps. And it's kind of alarming because if you're my age, when you were going through your brainwashing in the state schools about how bad things were in the Soviet Union, you were shown photos of supermarket shelves that tended to be mostly empty. And you were told, see, that proves the Soviet Union is a failed system. Communism is bad. This is what communism brings you. And now we have it here on our shelves. And they're trying to tell, well, this is a blessing of capitalism. We're optimizing our inventory flow here. I'll tell you what really annoys me. You know, we all have certain products we like to buy, certain comfort foods, certain whatever. And over at our local supermarket, and I'm not going to give you their name because I'm about to say something very bad about them. We have noticed over the last several months, they stopped carrying the stuff we wanted to buy, and they've replaced it with clearly inferior products. Don't taste as good, don't work as well, but the price went up. And just like Microsoft's attitude of you will use the products we tell you to use, we're seeing even at the supermarket level. No, we're not going to sell you what you want to buy. We're going to sell you what we think we should sell you to maximize our profitability. And that, too, is an aspect of fascism here. All right, let's talk about gun control. Obama is already wagging the bloody shirts out of Kalamazoo. And he's out there saying that, his gun control would have prevented that because it should be harder for troubled people to obtain guns. He could start with himself after all the drone murders he's committed. But here's the problem. The guy in Kalamazoo had no history of mental illness, no criminal history, no history of any kind of violence, was apparently the nicest kind of guy you could ever know. And he was able to legally buy guns. There is nothing in Obama's gun control agenda would have stopped this guy from having a gun, short of a total gun ban, which is what we know Obama really wants. But here, we're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to come back and talk about gun control a little bit more. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about Obama's gun-grabbing agenda. And he's out there waving the bloody shirts from Kalamazoo, saying that his gun control measures that he is after would have prevented the shooting. No, they wouldn't. Now, the official story is this individual made his living as an Uber driver, very peaceful, placid guy, friends with everybody, no prior history of violence, no criminal history, no history of mental illness. There is nothing about him that would have justified the government saying this guy should not be given guns. Now, maybe they're saying that he has no history of mental illness because they're trying to protect the pharmaceutical industry. But they've left themselves without a lever. Obama is just out there flat out lying when he says his gun control could have prevented this tragedy. No, it couldn't. Now, here's where it gets a little bit weird. Everybody say, why did this guy do it? Now, one report is that when he was arrested and arraigned, he was just like zoned out like a zombie. Just nothing happening on his face. One of the witnesses in the case, this guy was an Uber driver, and a passenger in his car was saying he seemed perfectly okay. Then he gets a call on his cell phone. And something that was said to him over that cell phone call just seemed to bring this change over him. And he started driving erratically and acting very strange. This could very easily be another staged, set-up shooting, but they picked a guy who doesn't serve the agenda. Unless the agenda is to say, any one of you could go postal in a moment's notice, we don't care how law-abiding and healthy you've been, we can't trust you with guns, which is a little bit over the top. By the way, up in Chicago, the model for gun control in America, shootings have doubled since last year, showing how well gun control works to reduce crime. Now, over on the Idaho State Capitol, they had a demonstration in support of gun rights. CBS News reported it as dozens of gun rights advocates showed up. And they got called on it because there were actually over 1,000 people there. And CBS was forced to basically back up and say, yeah, it was thousands of these gun nuts. These Second Amendment people. How silly. Constitutional amendment. It's amazing. Meanwhile, on the other side, something you probably have not heard, apparently over the weekend, this is being reported in the D.C. Clothesline, Edgar Camacho Alvarado, 23, was shot and killed by police. Police were searching the neighborhood for a murder suspect. The young man was not actually guilty of any crime, did not pose a threat to the officers, didn't get in their way. He was in his front yard working on his truck engine. and the police just shot and killed him and are refusing to say anything about what happened. Apparently, the victim's younger brother had his cell phone taken by the police and possibly has a video of the shooting. But remember, it's you law-abiding citizens that can't be trusted with guns. It's amazing. According to a study that was reported over in USA Today, no less, 58,000 U.S. bridges stretching from New York, all across the country, 58,000 U.S. bridges have been determined to be structurally deficient, which is engineering speak for could collapse without warning at any time. These bridges are being used 200 million times every day. If you took all these bridges and stretched them end to end, it would reach all the way from New York City to Miami. Our infrastructure is rotting away. It's corroding away. Why? Because all of your tax money is taken away from you, and it's not spent on you and the nation. It's given to Wall Street. It's given to the military-industrial complex. It's given to Israel. It's given to the money junkies. This is what fascism is and does. Look at the water coming out of the faucets at Flint, Michigan, and now down in Texas. They got a problem there. We're becoming a third world nation in terms of the standard of living for the ordinary American citizen. In terms of economic rights and freedoms, employment, living conditions, health and safety. We're not that far away from Rio, what's going on down there. They've given up trying to clean up the water for the Olympics. Now, over in Japan, TEPCO has now acknowledged that it should have announced or admitted that there were meltdowns at Fukushima earlier than they did. Now, remember, when it happened, we looked at the evidence and we said, there are core meltdowns in progress. And TEPCO came out, oh, don't be ridiculous. These reactors are safe. And General Electric said, don't be ridiculous. These reactors are safe. And Japan's government came out and said, don't be ridiculous. These reactors are safe. And here we are, almost 5 years later, and everybody's saying, yeah, you caught us. There were meltdowns. You know, we're going to get Ann Coulter over here to remind you that a little radiation is good for you. That fire in the landfill near St. Louis is getting closer to the illegally dumped radioactive waste left over from the Manhattan Project. And it's a reminder, these people who love weapons and war, they don't care what happens to anybody else around them. They just want the bomb. We've got the bomb. And that's, oh, those people in St. Louis, they won't matter. Up in Washington State, apparently a flash flood took radioactive contamination from the Hanford site and drove it across one of the main highways there. And, of course, they're saying, nothing to worry about, nothing to worry. Really, it's not a problem. The good news is your tires are going to melt the snow all by themselves now if you drove over that particular spill. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Scott in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike, tonight?
Yes.
I wanted to talk to you about what you were talking about earlier about money. And, you know, you talk about this nation being slave to the ground. It started way back when this guy discovered gold. And gold was too heavy to go to the bank. And then they got a bright idea leading the dead sheep to the loan. And then they say, oh,
okay, well, we're going to have to take a break here for a second. Don't go away. I want to clarify a few concepts when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Scott in Wisconsin. And, Scott, before we move any further, I want to remind everybody of the fact that there are different kinds of banks. The banks that we all do business with, that we're taught about in school, are called depositor banks. In other words, you deposit your money in the bank pools it together, right, loans it back out for economic development, charges interest on it, splits the interest with the savings accounts holders. Now, that's the classic model of a depositor bank. They are very useful to their community, and we're not tarnishing them when we're talking about private central banks, which are a completely different operation. They call themselves a bank to sort of fool people that that's what they're all about, just like they call themselves the Federal Reserve to fool you into thinking that they're actually part of the government, which they're not. They're no more federal than Federal Express. Private central banks are legalized counterfeiting operations. They are allowed to create money out of thin air. They don't need people to make deposits. Their business is to create money out of thin air and loan it into circulation at interest. And it is a system to economically enslave a nation and its people, to hopelessly trap them until the people stand up and treat the central bankers the way King Philip IV did. And though that...
Michael, I wanted to say, though, I agree with you on that. I'm with you on that. But let me just finish. You got out to the loan. How many people have been able to pay their house off? Then you get the third thing, is called interest, pounded on top of it. And then to finish it off, Michael, talk about credit cards. Look at the amount of people in America back when 2008 happened that were trying to make their house payments on their credit cards. What is the average person in America to seal the deal on the debt, Michael, with the credit cards? This is one of the way that they have attacked, like you said, on that side of fascism. And it's one of the ways that a lot of American people have been slaved in this pyramid scheme that this nation goes back to what even George Washington said, this Ponzi scheme is going to fail in the end. So thank you for taking my call, Michael, and you could make a comment on the rest what I saw. Take care and aloha.
Aloha, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And, you need to remember that private central banks are not the same thing as the depositor banks that you normally do business with. In fact, when the Second Bank of the United States was shut down by Andrew Jackson, they tried to operate as a regular depositor bank and collapsed after only 2 years. They don't know how to do banking properly. They're legalized counterfeiting operations. That's what they are. They're allowed to just make the money out of thin air, loan it into circulation at interest, and it creates enslavement to those bankers. It allows them to eventually own all the hard, real assets of the nation and its people, and you're just left with bits and pieces of paper. And now, of course, they want to take away from you the freedom to take the money that you have earned and put it in your pocket. They're saying, oh, no, it doesn't matter if you've earned it. You will keep it in the bank, and we are going to have to take part of it because we're in trouble. And even that is not going to hold off the eventual crash. It's an act of desperation. It's a stopgap measure, and it is a reminder that the last official act of any government is to loot the nation. And that's where they are right now, between banning cash, negative interest rates, bail-ins, TARP, quantitative easing, the Bureau of Land Management. The government and the money junkies are perpetuating themselves literally by plundering the nation and its people. Civil forfeiture, sky-high traffic, forcing you to buy things you don't really want. All of that is fascism. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about human-caused global warming. Story that came out of Edbury.com. There is a new peer-reviewed professional paper written by Willie Soon, Ronan Connolly, and Michael Connolly that has come on out saying, ta-da, the sun controls climate on Earth. And this paper shows that greenhouse gas is an insignificant player, may even be a non-player. Now, the reason this report is significant is not because it confirms what we've been saying all along. These scientists paid for this research out of their own pocket. They did not get any money from the government. They didn't get any money from Al Gore. They didn't get money from any of these groups whose agendas are to use the threat of human-caused global warming to sell you carbon credits, get you to pay carbon taxes. And again, back in 2000, all these people were, the carbon Nazis were saying, oh, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. And we've got record cold, record snow yet again this winter. Not as bad as last year because of the El Nino current. And the El Nino current is caused by undersea volcanoes. It's got nothing to do with you. It's just another way to trick you out of your money and your obedience by a government that doesn't know any other way to run a country than trickery, lies, fraud, and deception. That's their entire toolkit. They have power over you because they're willing to behave this way, and you are not. You are convinced that you should never lie. Government lies all the time. You are convinced you should not take what does not belong to you. Government takes all the time. You are convinced that you should not kill your fellow human being. Government wages wars. That's all that power is, the willingness and ability to do things other people cannot or will not. That's it. That's all it is. The government of Pakistan is now warning their citizens to prepare for global cooling. Storm is currently bringing heavy snow to the Midwest. Chicago is getting it. Whole list of snowstorm closings we posted to the main page of WhatReallyHappened.com, schools and churches and everything. And it's not getting a lot of coverage in the corporate national news. Local media is covering it. They have to. Public safety is at risk. But you're not seeing it on the TV network news because Obama still wants his carbon tax. And they're going to go on trying to convince you that 2015 was the hottest year on record and 2016 is going to be worse. Because they didn't get the money they thought they were going to get from Obamacare. Now they're going to hit you with a carbon tax. Then there'll be a nitrogen tax and a cloud tax and a water tax and a this tax and a that tax. And they don't seem to understand they've already hit the law of diminishing returns. Because when they force you to buy something or they take another tax or collect another fee, people are having to choose to go without something else. There is no more money out here. The money junkies got it all. That was the whole point of the private central bank model. All the nation's wealth in the pockets of the bankers, and not one of these systems ever had a plan put together what to do when they succeeded. And it all started to come apart. And that's why we know they aren't addicts. Their entire consciousness is getting more and more money, getting that rush of scoring more and more money and not having to give anything substantive back for it. And just like an opium addict or alcohol addict or a meth addict or whatever else is out there, mushroom addict, they're totally focused on that next pleasurable rush, and they don't care what their behavior is doing to their community and society around them. They just don't. We don't recognize that we're dealing with addicts because they are decorating themselves with very lavish lifestyles. But then so do the regular drug lords. But that's what it is. These people are addicts. And I want to differentiate between the money junkies who game the system to take your money versus people who provide a product or a service that you voluntarily trade your money for. I don't want to blur them together. When James Cameron makes a wonderful movie and I buy the Blu-ray, that's of my free choice, and that's how capitalism is supposed to work. We don't blend people like that who accomplish, who create things, with the Wall Street money junkies who think that the world should feed them wealth and they don't have to give anything back for it at all. Those are the ones who are tearing our civilization apart. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today here on this Hump Day Wednesday. We're going to talk a little bit about glyphosate, which, as you know, is the active ingredient in Monsanto's Roundup weed killer. Now, we need to back up and remember that last year the World Health Organization classified glyphosate as a probable carcinogen in humans. There was intense lobbying to prevent them from saying it's a definite carcinogen, but the World Health Organization stood its ground and said it's a probable carcinogen. But it's still for sale. And it's a top seller. Monsanto makes a huge amount of money off of this. And we're talking about glyphosate is now used to cover nearly every acre of cultivated cropland in the U.S., which means you're eating the stuff. Now, the Food and Drug Administration, which is supposed to be looking out for the safety of the food and drugs you are taking, and we know that's a joke, still allows glyphosate in your food. relying on Monsanto's assurances that it is perfectly safe, and ignoring the World Health Organization and a large body of other evidence from around the globe. And this is actually touching close to home here in Hawaii. Down on the Big Island, there's an area called Kona. And it has a very unique type of coffee. And there's a lady named Christine Shepard, and she used to be the president of the Kona Coffee Growers Association. And their main agenda was to try and stop companies from making up coffee blends that had like 10% of their Kona beans and calling it Kona coffee. Because pure Kona coffee is really very good. The only coffee on the planet any better is Jamaican Blue Mountain. But companies would take 10% of the Kona beans and then bundle it with really cheap coffee from someplace else, label it as Kona or Kona blend, and they'd go to market, and they were able to undersell the local coffee producers who were producing 100% Kona coffee. And they were trying to get that stuff. Well, she kind of got a little derailed. She and her husband had one of the largest pure Kona coffee plantations down there. Came down with cancer in 2003, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and was forced to sell the coffee plantation to pay for the cancer treatments. Now, she survived, and she and her husband Kenneth are suing Monsanto because Monsanto insisted glyphosate is perfectly safe. And now that the World Health Organization has come on out and said that glyphosate is a probable carcinogen, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is one of the cancers it is linked to, and apparently information has surfaced that Monsanto knew there was an issue with glyphosate when they started selling it. It's not a case of, oh, we thought it was safe, our tests showed it was safe, and we didn't know any better. Apparently, Discovery has uncovered documents that Monsanto knew it was dangerous, but they're going to sell it anyway. They're making tons and tons of money. And if you get cancer, it's good for the economy because, look, you have to give money to the medical industrial complex. Our good friends over there, they buy a lot of our products. And so you had to sell your farm. You've given some other young up-and-coming couple a chance to own their dream and pay heavy mortgage on it for the rest of their lives. So we're going to try and get Christine Shepard on the radio show because I think Claire and I actually met this couple many years ago when we were in Kona at the coffee plantation. The photo looks very, very familiar. And I'm going through my photos from the Big Island, but I think we actually met her. We're going to try and get her on the show here. Now, House Speaker Paul Ryan has issued a statement regarding the passage of H.R. 2017. The so-called Common Sense Nutrition Disclosure Act, basically saying it's just too much of a burden to food corporations to tell you what it is you're eating. It's just a huge burden. We shouldn't burden these giant multi-million-dollar corporations with having to tell you what's actually in what you're putting in your body. Just hold your nose, take a deep breath, and swallow it. That's what you're here for, to consume and spend money. Now, what's really kind of weird is that health and safety standards already require food production companies to be conducting tests, to have a list of the products, of the ingredients in their products. Just adding that to a label isn't going to cost much. You can bet if there was something in there they thought would help sell the product, they'll spend the money to change that label. Meanwhile, the Senate is considering a bill called the DARK Act, as in keeping us all in. That would be a nationwide ban on GMO labeling. Because after all, your refusal to buy GMO products just because it might make you sick is harming the business of the GMO companies. It's an unfair situation when natural organic farmers are getting a larger share of the market just because GMO is harmful. We have to be fair to the giant GMO corporations. You will eat their product, and you will not complain. Now, here's an article over at Investment Watch blog, and It's reporting on a 4-year research project from the United States National Human Genome Research Institute. And it's confirming something I had mentioned before. When a company goes into an organism and it tinkers with a gene, the effects can spread through the entire organism. These proteins do not exist in isolation. The reason so much information is in such a tiny, tiny space is that it is intensely self-referential. And when you tinker with one gene to produce a result, it has side effects. One of the most well-known examples of that is Roundup Ready corn, which produces a corn stalk much tougher than the natural variety that can damage tractor tires unless they have Kevlar belts. Now, nobody intended for these corn stalks to be this hardy. It was totally unexpected. Nobody was looking for it. And the danger is that some of these malformed proteins, it could be years before they start to manifest symptoms. And by then it could be very easily too late to do anything about it. But this research is confirming gene modification affects far more of the organism than the targeted proteins. And nobody's looking, nobody's checking, nobody cares. They're just in a rush to get the product to market and make money. Genetic technology is the most dangerous science that we have played with. It's even more dangerous than nuclear power. Nuclear power, yeah, you have a meltdown, you move out of the area, you stay away from it for a couple of 1,000 years, or you cover it over. But if you make a mistake in a gene and it breaks into the wild, it's only a matter of time before it is everywhere. And there's no taking it back. I mean, look at the GM disaster with the mosquitoes down in Brazil, where they thought they were going to sterilize the population, and instead they got a population boost. Now they want to zap the mosquitoes with gamma rays from drones overhead. They're playing with this stuff very, very recklessly. I'm still concerned about the epicite gene. If that breaks into the wild, and I think it already has, it's only a matter of time before all corn on Earth will sterilize humans who eat it. And that is an extinction-level event. I'm sure Monsanto already has the Roundup Ready baby set to go, so if you've got money, you can have a child. And it's sort of, kind of, maybe going to look like a human being, and for a little extra money, we'll kind of, sort of, maybe make it look like the parents. But you can see how dangerous this is. Nobody's thinking long-term, overall, big picture. That is dangerous. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everyone that you know, be there to answer the questions people are finally starting to ask. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.